foam roller.
The frequency range of these meters are all different.
As a matter of fact, 95% of those circuit color switches installed without consultation are installed incorrectly, and there's no benefit. Hi, welcome. I am excited and delighted to share with you the arrival of the new Trifield meter. The Trifield meter has been around for so long, and certainly many of my colleagues who have an interest in radiation, we all started exploring with the Trifield meter in our hand. It had a very, kind of its own look, a bit boxy. It had the needle in it that we all appreciated, and it, was for measuring magnetic fields, electric fields, and radio frequency radiation, which was labeled microwaves on there. Magnetic fields was always its claim to fame. It was not as accurate, or not as sensitive, I should say, for the electric fields and the radio frequency radiation. So anyway, the old model is no longer being made, so that'll be phased out. And so it's out with the old, in with the new. The new Trifield meter, the TF2, has a digital display and a dial on the front, similar to the old one, but instead of having one unit that is a flat response measurement and one unit that is a weighted measurement, now both are combined. So it'll just be the one unit, and you can select on the dial how you want to measure. For me, my preference is the flat response measurement, which is also the type of measurements made with the more professional instrumentation. So you select that yourself by turning the dial. It's got the radio frequency radiation at the end. So the magnetic reading is in milligauss, not in nanoteslas, which we see in a lot of the European meters. Between those two, there's only a factor of 100 between them. So 100 nanoteslas is 1 milligauss. It's easy to convert between one and the other. Electric fields are in volts per meter, and radio frequency radiation is in milliwatts per square meter. And so that is a little bit coarse. Meaning we would like to see smaller than that. Its lowest indication it can give you is 0.1 milliwatts per square meter, which would equal 100 microwatts per square meter. And as in our industry, readings as low as 10 microwatts per square meter or 1 microwatts per square meter or even less are already deemed significant for some people. You're just nowhere near going to get a reading anywhere on this instrument with that. So we'll see how this instrument stacks up. I'm going to take it out in the field, and I'm going to compare it with some other meters at the same time. I've got a number of UHS2s from AlphaLab, which are basically their base professional Gauss meter, focused, dedicated solely on magnetic fields. So I've got some of those to compare with as well, and I've got an NFA1000 and an NFA30, which are also kind of high-grade professional Gauss meters. So completely different kettle of fish financially, but it'll be interesting to see how this amateur layperson instrument kind of stacks up against the professional gear, and see how good it is. So let's go out and see how it holds up. We're taking the TF2, the brand new Trifield meter, on a bit of a field trip. I'm going to be visiting some different locations with magnetic fields, see how she performs, also making a comparison with some different high caliber Gauss meters as well, to kind of see where she ranks. And I might also have an opportunity to maybe take some radio frequency radiation measurements and see how she compares in comparison to some more expensive meters. Okay, here we go. Got my little contraption, my meters, and the GoPro set up. So let's have a look what we can see. So working towards these transmission lines, looking at the UHS2, which is AlphaLab's higher caliber instrument with slightly more accuracy. And I should really stand still for a moment. Getting very similar readings.
It's important with the TF2 to keep an eye on the peak values. If we look at the peak values compared to the other instruments, getting very, very close readings. Also the NFAs on the right, very steady value. So it all seem to be fairly close on par. Okay, let's have a look here. Again, all very close. It's interesting to see the old Trifield meters, which are brand new units by the way, set on the 0 to 3 range. They're clearly reading over 2, where the other other meters all consistently are indicating around the 1.7, 1.8. On the UHS2s, 1.9-ish on the NFAs, at 1.9 on the TF2s. Now the frequency range of these meters are all different, so you're always going to get a slightly different outcome anyway. Technically speaking, the position of each instrument in this tray is also different. Let's have a look here. 7.2, 7.5 on the TF2s, and about 7.1 on the NFAs, 7.2. Very, very close. Okay, they're all reading very close, which is good to see. I'll just turn them 0 to 100 range, and they seem to be under reading somewhat now. I think the TF2 is performing very well considering the price difference with the other meters. Okay. Okay, so here we've got about 1 milligauss on the UHS2. The peak hold on the TF2 seems to agree with that, 1.1. The NFA is also 1.1, 1.1.5. The old Trifield meters at about 1.5. They're again overreading a little bit. So I think it's safe to say that the TF2 has really pulled up the quality of the Trifield meter closer to the the more professional meters, which is great. Which for magnetic fields makes that a good layperson amateur instrument, especially to go house hunting with and avoid the trouble. Now, let me just reiterate that 1 milligauss is not what you're after. Ideally, you want to have 1.3 or less, especially in a bedroom environment. But 1 is where all the bad news starts in terms of research. So, 1 and above, you ideally don't want to be exposed to. You want to have less. Here we've got some houses with along them running some local distribution lines, so things that you might have running through your street. And so let's take some Gauss meters out, including the TF2, and let's see how that house over there is affected by the magnetic fields from these local distribution lines that most people don't think twice about. Okay, let's have a look. I've got my little tray with me to compare the new TF2 from AlphaLab with some of the base professional meters. Okay, so here I'm standing close to the local distribution lines. And so if I look at the UHS2s, we're looking at about 10 milligauss. The TF2s indicating about 12, looking at the peak hold measurement. The NFAs looking about 11.3-ish, somewhere there. So again, very close to one another. The older Trifield meter model showing about 2.5. That's on the, correction, on the 0 to 100 range, showing about 8. In this situation, they're under reading a little bit. Okay, so moving towards the house on my left. Now let's go to the very front of the building, which is here. Okay, so over here we're still looking at a good 3.5 milligauss. And yeah, all instruments kind of agree on that. The TF2 reads a little smidge higher, but you do got to wait for this peak hold to settle, right? So if you've walked from an area with higher exposure into an area with slightly lower, it takes a couple of seconds for the peak hold reading to let go and start adjusting. Okay, so the old Trifield meter showing us about 3.5, so that's now very similar to the other meters. So if I now go further forward, right, and this house is, you know, now probably where the lounge room is of this particular house, or it could be master bedroom at the front of the property. So we got about 2.4 on the UHS2s, got 2.4 and a little bit on the NFAs, and in the peak hold on the TF2s we're looking at about 2.5, 2.7. So if anything, reading a smidge higher, but again the news is the same. There's 1 milligauss is really what you're trying to avoid. So now I'm well in the back of the property. So TF2s reckon 1.8, NFAs reckon 1.9, and the TF2s are now coming closer to them, 1.9 as well. Okay, so you can see how important it is to measure for magnetic fields in streets that look absolutely fine, with the local distribution lines around us that we're all familiar with, and most people wouldn't think twice about. But here we are, measuring magnetic fields, and basically that house over there being engulfed in a magnetic field of a strength of at least 1.5, 1.6 milligauss at the very back of it. So there's lots of research showing that it increases their risks of health issues. And so, you know, you have to do your own research and decide what sort of research you put your faith in. But yeah, you got to make the decision: is this a good property for you to, you know, is this a good long-term strategy to be here, right? It is interesting to note that people that come from a house where there is magnetic field issues, when they go house hunting and they don't have an instrument with them, they tend to buy the exact same problem again, because it feels like home, as misguided as that feeling is. Yeah, so Gauss meter is a little expense to make sure you get it right, because you can't shield against magnetic fields. Not really with anything that you and I can afford. So yeah, measure it before committing anywhere. Hello. Well, here we are. We're sitting in a street. I don't know if you can make it out, but between the trees over there, you see some black pillar coming up. That's actually a sign at the front of the local shopping center here, and there's a mobile phone tower panels up there, so kind of nicely disguised. Anyway, so we're at a distance where our exposure could actually be worse a little bit further away, because these things radiate outwards but not directly per se straight down. So of course radiation will hit us here, but it may be more intense if we go further away. So anyway, it doesn't matter, just a little test. So we've got the TF2 here, and I've put some instruments for radio frequency radiation next to it. So we've got the HF59B, which is a well-respected air measuring instrument, and then I've also put the GeoVital HF field probe next to it. It's kind of a completely different kettle of fish, because it doesn't do an air measurement. It actually gives you an indication of how much the body is absorbing. It's a bit of a different story. So, but anyway, I've put it next to it anyway to have a little bit of a comparison. All right, so let's have a look at how these meters compare. Okay, so here we've got the HF meters next to each other. We've got the TF2 in the middle, measuring in milliwatts per square meter. That's a little bit of a coarse measurement. We would have loved that to be finer, and more than microwatts per square meter, because basically 10 microwatts per square meter and above is where things are getting quite severe in our opinion. But even levels far lower than that, you'd still be looking at shielding. So at the moment we're looking at enormously high readings, but in an area where there's less readings, the finer work, that's where your decisions need to be made. So with the HF59B, this is set to its coarse max range, so it measures milliwatts per square meter as well, so they should be similar. Now this is also an omnidirectional antenna, so this one is enthusiastically already indicating, if we look at the peak value, it's holding 33 milliwatts per square meter, 62, getting up quite high readings. Before we saw it at levels at 130 even. Where that HF59B sitting stationary has got very different readings. Now you're supposed to take readings with that a little bit different, which we'll do in a minute. But still then we're not getting to any near the readings that this Trifield meter is getting. Now the Trifield meter supposedly measures up to 6 gigahertz, where the HF59B only measures to 2.7 gigahertz, so there could be a difference there. But I think there's just a limitation as to the accuracy of the Trifield meter. It is what it is. It's a layman person instrument. This one now going up far a bit higher, about 8 milliwatts per square meter. So yeah, I mean, you can only build what you can build at a certain price point. It looks like the Trifield meter is a great meter for sniffing out sources of radiation, as in things in your house, but not really the kind of caliber instrument you'd need to assess whether or not a bedroom, for example, or a home would need shielding. Now the GeoVital instrument is next to it, not really built for a air measurement, so the numbers now don't really mean an awful lot. But if I touch that contact aerial, now I can see the levels that my body are absorbing. Now of course it fluctuates. And anyway, in the line of thinking of this instrument, any value over 100 would require shielding, and ideally you would see under 30 in a bedroom environment. So let's have a look at this this HF59B, wielding it properly to take a measurement and compare that with the Trifield meter. Let's have a look. So I've got the HF59B here. I'll put it on peak hold, so it remembers the highest reading. I'll increase the volume a little bit for our audio sensors. With this instrument you're supposed to scoop, because radio waves are polarized horizontally or vertically. And so by scooping that around and getting your body out of its way from one particular angle to another, you scoop around, and then the peak hold value remembers the highest value it saw or measured. So looking at it now, can you see that? We're looking at about 8 milliwatts per square meter. That's the highest that the instrument managed to pick up. Now if I've got that TF2, if I just hold it here, it's already showing me a peak value in the 180 190, 200. So this is, I mean, 382 milliwatts per square meter. So this is reading so incredibly much higher. Now, I don't think this has to do an awful lot with the fact that it measures up to 6 gigahertz. I think we're just looking at a less accurate reading on account of that. Of course, this instrument is a lot cheaper than the more professional meters. So, yeah, great to sniff out sources of radio frequency radiation with, but possibly not to make decisions on whether or not shielding is required. Meaning, this reading seems to be very enthusiastic and always tell you that shielding is required, which is not always the case. So I'm just holding it steady now, so not quite sure if I do a similar sort of scooping movement. It doesn't seem to make much difference. The peak measurement keeps telling me 200, 89, 160. 242. So yeah, these readings are a lot higher than the HF59B. So yeah, I think we're looking at a difference, definitely in price point, between this affordable amateur instrument and the more professional caliber instrument that measures the air. Again, if I just grab that geovital instrument, I'm just measuring my body again, standing in this position. I've got a different shape. I'm a little bit taller, I'm a little bit bigger. And we're looking at a reading of about 1800, 2000 microvolts. So anyway, let's find a different spot and let's have a measure somewhere else. Okay, so here we are near a national park. I've tried to get away from the mobile phone towers, but of course you can't really. There's still cell phone coverage here as well. But anyway, let's have a look at what these instruments now tell us. So I've got the TF2 here. So if we look at that reading, I'm just having to look in the screen to see if you can actually read it instead of getting a reflection. Can you see it like that? Okay, so that's telling us about 0.3, 0.4 milliwatts per square meter. Peak holds, it's at 0.7. So at these levels we would already recommend shielding as well. But anyway, that's what the TF2 tells us at this location. If I grab the HF59B, again this measures a lower range, 2.3 gigahertz. But if I put it on peak hold and do our little scoopy exercise, trying to catch those different polarized radio waves, and it's remembering the reading for us, and it's telling us 70 microwatts per square meter. So that will be equivalent to 0.07 milliwatts per square meter. So significantly less than the TF2. Now again, with these readings, if this was a bedroom, shielding would still be indicated, but still a decent difference. I think it's just the reality of the price point of the TF2, where it's a good instrument to sniff out sources of radiation, but not necessarily a good instrument to evaluate whether or not a home or a bedroom needs shielding. Because the way it's working at the moment, it's very enthusiastic in recommending shielding, and it's not always required. At the levels we are experiencing here, we would want to shield. And so the geovital instrument, would also agree with that, measuring up to 8 gigahertz, but then assessing what my body's absorbing. We're looking at about 300-ish microvolts. So again, if that's over 100, we recommend shielding, and ideally we'd love to see less than 30 in a bedroom. Okay, so yeah, just a lower radiation exposure situation. The TF2 seems to still read a fair bit higher than the HF59B, and both those instruments are the ones that do air measurements. So we're kind of comparing apples and apples between those two, even though the frequency range is supposedly a bit wider on the TF2.
Okay, let's have a look at the electric field subject. Now before we start, this instrument, as other instruments as well, measure, let's say, the air for electric fields. I'm personally not so excited about that. I'm more interested in the person and the body, so I like to measure the body for electric field exposure, which in 95% of bedrooms is a problem, by the way, and should be mitigated. So this measures a little differently. So to measure electric fields on the TF2, you simply just move to, I would go standard and electric, and then you put the instrument down. Now, electric fields are very different from radio frequency radiation and magnetic fields. So they're a bit dynamic. They want to go to ground. And so if there's a bag of water, as in me, standing near the walls that has got electric fields coming out of it, it'll latch on to me, and electric fields will accumulate towards me. So if I hold this instrument and measure this location, I get a vast different reading than if I leave the instrument there and walk away. This is normal. Okay, so if you want to measure what a location is like, you should be measuring without touching it. The Trifield meter has never really been, electric fields has never really been a strong suit. Its lowest indicating value is 1 volt per meter, which is basically under 1 volt per meter would be considered no concern, and above 1 volt per meter would mean slight concern or higher. So it's kind of not fine enough to give you the distinction between okay and needs mitigation. So if I have my hand near that meter, it's reading about 62, but when I take that hand away, and that's then how you're supposed to read it with as much distance between the two of you as you can, with that wiring right next to it, it's reading 11 volts per meters on the normal indicator, and the peak value is 15. Now if I compare this with this instrument, which is a completely different caliber of instrument, certainly cost-wise, so if I put that on electric fields, if I hold the instrument, it tells me about 280, but when I stand back, have some distance between me, it's telling me 46. And so both values were telling me that this is an area that should be mitigated for electric fields. I don't think the TF2 is an instrument that will confirm to you that you fixed it. So you really need a professional to come through and assess this for you. And as I mentioned, 95% of homes have a problem with this. And so this is normally your number one thing that needs to be fixed. But between these two, this seems to be reading 4 times higher than what the TF2 is indicating. So again, a big difference there. Here it underreads with radio frequency radiation. It seems to overread. Okay, let's have a look at the radio frequency radiation story as well. So measuring on the RF setting, we've got a reading of about 1 milliwatt per square meter, and the peak is indicating to me 8.9, 7.8, 8.4. So if that was correct, that'd be 8,500 microwatts per meter square. So if I ask the HF59B if it agrees with that, I'll just put it on peak hold, do a little scooping exercise. And it comes up with 3.8 milliwatts per square meter. So 3,700 microwatts per square meter. So again, indicates about half of that reading. Now if I make if I turn the phone on, already here things are getting different. Okay, the HF59B is indicating 4.4 milliwatts per square meter, where the Trifield meter is still sitting at 0.5 or 1.2, 1.3. So it doesn't seem to pick this phone up where this one does. If I turn the base off, then the HF59B drops off to 0.01 milliwatts per square meter. If I go to a finer reading, the noise comes back then. It's now telling me that we've got about microwatts per square meter, where if the reading of the TF2 is correct, sorry there's a bit of a jump at the moment, if the TF2 is correct, it says it's 200 microwatts per square meter, 0.2 milliwatts per square meter. So they do go up at the same time, but this phone didn't seem to bother it all that much. And this one maxing out, I'll take it back to the course reading, showing me 3 milliwatts, 4 milliwatts, 5 milliwatts per square meter, where the Trifield meter sits at so that's 0.6, 0.8. So it doesn't seem to pick this phone up necessarily well. If I make a call, you can see a reaction and things are happening, but it's just I'm not quite sure if it reacts to it so well. So if we take this out of the equation, and of course if you think you can turn your base station off and your phone will be quiet, you've got to take the battery out of these things as well, because otherwise these are looking and sending out signals trying to find the base. So at the moment, again we're looking at 0.2 milliwatts on the TF2 and still about 25-30 microwatts on the HF59B. So that would be 0.03 milliwatts. So they disagree quite a lot. It's just that in the bottom ranges, the TFT is just not sensitive enough to pick up these finer things. Microwave, also fun to have a play with. So if we turn this on, a couple of seconds later, there you go. I'll take that to the course reading, and also this maxes out higher than 20 milliwatts per square meter. The TF2 is enthusiastically reading really high, looking at 200, 300, 400 milliwatts per square meter. So I'm not quite sure if that's accurate, because this one can't keep up. It doesn't have that bigger, higher numbers range. But again, you can definitely confirm that most microwaves leak a lot. You don't want to look into them to see if your food's ready yet. So yeah, when it comes to the radio frequency radiation of the TF2, I think it leaves a lot to be desired. It's great for trying to sniff out things that might be producing radiation. I think if things are in the higher frequencies, it's got a little bit of an issue in picking things up. As in, I see this one react, but this one lagging behind a lot. So it's for the layperson, it's nice to look around, get a bit of an idea of radio frequency radiation and what might be producing things, but to assess a home with it and verify that, or determine if shielding is required, for example, or better yet, if shielding was implemented, to see if that shielding was working well. I don't think this is the meter for that. You need a very different caliber of instrument, or better yet, just get a professional to come to your house and investigate it for you. Taking a measurement is one, but interpreting on how that's best tackled, how that's best mitigated, yeah, you need some advice from somebody who's got a lot of experience and history behind them. Okay, we're back. We've put the TF2 through its paces and compared it with some other instrumentation. And I have to say that for what it is, I think it's an interesting and quite valuable and nice instrument, especially for the amateur and of course in the lay person. So when it comes to the magnetic field readings for the TF2, I think it's an improvement on the old instrument, where the measurement values are lining up more with the more expensive instruments. Keep in mind you want to look at the peak hold value for this, which I think is a value to go on, which is the one that lines up mostly with the other instruments. Especially in the readings that matter, as in the 1 milligauss, the half a milligauss, the 0.3, the 0.2, that's where your decision making happens in relation to the environment where you sleep, or a home that you might be buying or renting. That's where the decisions are made, and that's where this lined up very, very closely to the other meters, which is fantastic. As the readings got higher, that accuracy seemed, the gap got a little bit bigger, but to be frank, I don't care, because I really don't care if it's 9 or 10 milligauss. It's terrible news regardless. It is all this information around the 1 milligauss and less which is far more important. So well done on the TF2 for getting that step closer to the more professional gear. So I think it's a great tool to go house hunting with and investigate those magnetic fields and make sure that you're not getting yourself into a property that has a problem that you can't fix. So just to recap on that, in my opinion, you should be looking at the peak hold value on the instrument, and that's the reading you should go by. My preference is in the standard reading, standard magnetic. I'm not a fan of the weighted variety. The other professional gear is also not weighted, so this is more like the professional units. Okay, that then brings us to electric fields and radio frequency radiation, and very much in line with the older unit, the electric fields, it's just not sensitive enough. It seems to underread compared with the other instrument that we compared with, and the lowest thing it can indicate to you, we would already be wondering or thinking we should mitigate that situation. So I don't think it can show you when an environment is okay the way it is and that no mitigation is required. I think it can indicate to you when something produces an electric field and there is something there, but not necessarily verify that it's okay and healthy to be there. So I don't think it has that sensitivity, which is a shame, but you get what you pay for, and this is still a wonderful price point for what it is. In terms of radio frequency radiation, at milliwatts per square meter, it's just a bit too coarse. I would have loved to see microwatts per square meters instead, but again, there'll be an issue with price. So where does this leave this? Well, I think this is a nice unit where you can go around and measure devices with to see what produces radio frequency radiation, but not necessarily the instrument to go in a bedroom and say, well, are the levels okay? Should we protect ourselves with shielding? That's not really what this is for. So I think we're kind of back where we were initially, the Trifield meter being a great source, or a great tool to measure magnetic fields with. For electric fields and radio frequency radiation, it's nice that it has it, but keep in mind that for those two areas you will need the help of a professional. So by all means, use this tool to go house hunting and find a property. When you think you've got the right one, then get a professional to come through and check your work with this meter, with their instrumentation, and then forward from there on. The electric fields and radio frequency radiation are normally easily, or one way or another, addressable, where the magnetic fields is the thing we're trying to avoid. So thank you for coming along on this little exploratory investigation into the new TF2. Congratulations, AlphaLab. I think you did a great job. And anyway, enjoy. Should you need some assistance, there's professionals out there that can help you. You can ask us, there's other people. We'd be delighted to assist you. Thanks.